In this video, we're going to be talking about the differences between monocot and dicotyledon seeds. Mono basically means one, so monocotyledon basically means it only has one cotyledon. However, for dicotyledon, it means they have two cotyledons. So let's look at it over here in these images. This only shows one half, but the other half on the other side also has another cotyledon. This can be represented like over here with a kidney bean. So one cotyledon is over here, but the other cotyledon's over here. The only reason it's like that is because I split it. So there's actually two different cotyledons you can see over here. Meanwhile, if I were to take a monocotyledon, for example here, corn, it's just one. You can't split it evenly. It's not symmetrical. It can't be split symmetrically. So it's monocotyledon because there's only one cotyledon. And it even shows over here. So as you can see, there's one cotyledon, but here, even though it only points to one cotyledon, on the other side there's another cotyledon over there. So now let's move on to the differences that you could find between these two. Monocotyledon, like I just said, there's only one cotyledon, like the corn, like I showed, but for dicotyledon, there's two, as shown over here with the kidney beans. Now, there are also differences in the root systems. For a monocotyledon, like one over here, it extends at a certain point, and when extending at a certain point, that's how you can identify that it is a monocotyledon, like this over here. At one, I'm gonna even show it. At one point, like at this part over here, it extends into multiple different root systems, and these multiple different root systems comes from monocotyledon seeds. Meanwhile, for dicotyledon seeds, there is one main root systems, and on that main root system, other root systems are forming out of that. That's how dicotyledon seeds look like, and you can see it over here. This is the main root system that comes from the embryo. This is the main root system that evolves from the radicle. And you can see the smaller other root systems that come from this main root system. So next, when talking about the stem, we can't actually like see it. Obviously, this is at a microscopic level. You know, the vascular bundle that makes up our xylem and phloem. Well, here there are several different vascular bundles, and they're all scattered around in different places in the stem. Meanwhile, over here in the dicotyledon, what happens is the vascular bundle follows some kind of ringed pattern. This ringed pattern separates the difference between monocots and dicots. Next, for leaves, there are different types of ways you can identify it. So for monocots, it has this has a very narrow shape, like grass basically. So this is how it looks like. It's very narrow. Also, another way you can identify is because you see the veins, it moves in a vertical pattern. The veins move in a parallel way, meaning they all point in one direction and just move like that. But if you look at the dicot over here, unlike the monocot, it's way more broader, and because it's way more broader, it is able to support multiple different patterns of vein systems. And because of that, the vein systems seem to, once they leave the midrib, they seem to like go out and spread out. So then when we move into the petals, the flowers, they typically come in multiples of 3. So as you can see, there's 6 over here, and that's like a multiple of 3. So since they actually come in multiples of 3. For dicots, they typically come in multiples of 4 or 5 or more than that. This is the difference between monocotyledon plants and dicotyledon plants. And these are the difference in the seeds. After we looked at a brief explanation on the differences of monocot and dicot plants, we're now going to be looking in further depth on the seeds. So this is a dicot seed and this monocot seed. So this is actually a representation of corn, which is actually a monocot seed. And let's first start off with that. The cotyledon basically acts as a nutritious part of a plant, or the part of the seed, that at first when the seed is growing and isn't able to produce photosynthesis, it is able to get food out of the cotyledon, so it is able to survive. Then we're going to be moving on to the embryo. The embryo consists of the epicotyl, hypocotyl, and radicle. The radicle, or later turns into the young root, basically is where these roots start to form, and that is how it is able to later get nutrients from the ground. Next, let's look at the hypocotyl. That's basically where the stem is going to be, and that's going to grow up so that it is able to transport the nutrients using the xylem and phloem, which is part of the vascular bundle. And finally, we're going to be looking at the epicotyl, also known as the plumule. The epicotyl is the one that will be forming these small leaves. And as we looked over there, as a monocot leaf, it is going to be having those narrow leaves as we talked. Those narrow leaves have these parallel veins that are going to be moving in one direction. Next, after that, there's the seed coat, which is basically just a thin layer of protection to help the seed. And lastly, we have the endosperm. The endosperm is basically just an extra food storage. The seed, before it can photosynthesize, it also uses the endosperm and cotyledon, so it is able to survive. The only difference in this monocot seed is that cotyledon is attached to the embryo, but the endosperm is its own separate pocket. It's not part of the embryo. All right, so now let's move on to a dicotyledon seed. So as we can see, they have basically almost the exact same stuff. So as we said, we have the embryo, which is the hypocotyl, the radicle, and the epicotyl, or also known as the plumule. So basically, the epicotyl helps in growing those leaves. The radicle helps in the foundation starting of the roots, and the hypocotyl is basically where the stem is going to be helping in transporting those nutrients and developing the xylem and phloem, also known as the vascular bundle. Then we have the endosperm and cotyledon, which is basically just food storage. So before the seed can photosynthesize, it's going to be getting its nutrients from these areas over here. The cotyledon is part of the embryo, but the endosperm is not. Next, we're going to be looking at the outer part, the seed coat. It has a very similar structure, except here it has a hilum. And because it has a hilum, because if I were to take, so you see this white colored dent over here, that's basically the hilum. The hilum is basically the part that used to attach to the plant. And because it used to attach to the plant, but then it fell off, that dent is called the hilum. This is basically the seed, and it's attached to the plant, and this part attaching to the plant is called the hilum. In conclusion, the monocotyledon and the dicotyledon seed anatomy is very similar, except the dicotyledon has a special dentation over here called the hilum. But other than that, every other part's the same. We have the embryo, the endosperms, and in the embryo we have the epicotyl, hypocotyl, radicle, cotyledon, and on the outside we have the seed coat that protects the seed. And another thing is that the monocotyledon only has one cotyledon, but over here, the dicotyledon has two cotyledons and two different seeds that attach but eventually split apart.